How's this? Can you hear me? Okay. Welcome to the second evening of the Pioneer Valley Poetry Festival. Thank you all for coming. Tremendous lineup tonight. I am going to begin by introducing the first poet of the evening. Apologize for the delay. We were missing batteries for the microphone. First poet of the evening is John Howe. I've been reading and rereading John Howe's work for nearly 20 years. The Desired Notebooks was the first collection that caught my attention. Then came Bloodline. And over the last decade, the four astonishing books that form his tetralogy. Here, a book of unknowing, You Are Everything You Are Not, and Vanishing Acts. These books, particularly, as well as his new manuscript, Scrolls of a Temple Sweeper, have been circulating through my consciousness and even through my blood. Each time I return to his poems, I find something new. It's not that I suddenly have aha moments, where I can suddenly pronounce to the air that I have found the key to decipherment to all he was doing. Far from it. My discoveries only lead me deeper into verse, expand my notion of how poetry can get written. John's work over the years has become more and more complex, at least in my view. His use of the dialogue form within his often lyrical, always musical, constructed discourse results in more questions than answers. Many of his lines, in fact, often seem as complex and as simple as koans. And John, Zen monk that he is, knows, and as any Zen student knows, that a koan is expansive, meant to expand the listener. And this is where the magic enters, where situation and knowledge of situation and non-knowledge become points of departure. There's also that ancient conundrum of the inefficiency of language to convey all that needs to be conveyed. This, I believe, is the fulcrum on which his verse balances, where language is both the vehicle and the obstacle to saying what needs to be said. At this nexus between knowing and not knowing, John's work flourishes. Please welcome John Howe.
The wind blowing through the forgiveness of trees, we who are everything that we breathe, going down to the earth in a bow of hallelujahs. Thank you for the words spoken and unspoken. Thank you for the wind on our back. Thank you for the praise of the song. That's a poem that I wrote for Patricia Pruitt a few years ago, actually. And she gave me permission to read it tonight. And my desire to dedicate this reading, my reading, to her, as perhaps some of you in this room know. She was is an extraordinary human being. I think one of our great unsung poets, although she is sung. And it reminds me of what Einstein once said. He said, my old friend Biso has left this strange world a little ahead of me. That means nothing. People like us know that distinctions between past, present, and future are just persistently stubborn illusions. So this is for Patricia. What I wanted to do tonight is keep track of my time and do something that I haven't done before. And thank you for that really wonderful introduction, and I'm quite honored to be here. And last night with the poets who read, it's really quite an honor. And some of my old friends are here as well, so that's really sweet. This so-called tetralogy that I've written actually began 15 years ago when my brother passed on from an overdose. And I was quite certain in my shakenness that I needed to write an elegy for him. And I did. And it began with a book called Here. And I thought that that would take care of that and the various conundrums that came up for me at that time in my life. And it was 15 years ago, so I thought this would be interesting. But it turned out that I wrote another book that continued that elegy in its own way, called A Book of Unknowing. And I was certain that was finishing it up. You know how you like to finish things up, or I do. It turned out it had. So I was actually deep in the mountains of China, and I thought that I was really through with things, and spending a lot of times in monasteries and doing fun things like that. And another one came out, You Are Everything You're Not. And so that was a trilogy, and given the fact that I have a fondness for Russian literature, and the troikas and trilogies are, you know, common to our bloodstream in translation, I thought that was done. But it turned out, still again, there was another one, and that was Vanishing Acts. And that came out last year. And as if that wasn't enough, there's another one that's quite a tome right here. And I've been traveling around the world lugging thousands of pages around, and it's done wonders for my back. So what I'm going to try is an experiment of some sort that I've never done before, and I will be conscious of time, is try to read a little something from each of those volumes. And I'll begin with Here. Across the alley of Ghost, the girl's tracks in the snow. Miraculous God. You can't buy the cliff or even rent it. There's no going back. It's just blood in the mouth. And the tiles of the roof are time too. You shoo away the dust and walk to the kitchen, clean the bowls, and start over again. The day comes without notice. The child turns to the ghost. How many years have passed? The dead one nods at the question and steps toward a seed, suddenly appearing by the cliff. You are no longer a child, says the dead one. It is time to become who you are. A gathering of whatever birds, dead or alive, we say, floating between the snow trees. Fragments of clouds shift sideways into no moon. They can't save you. Only float alongside the road beside us. Two blackbirds on the antenna wire with Tibetan flags. The monastery roof in a line of ants. This suffering cuts to the bone. What is it? The child abandoned in a crowded railroad station. The rain begins with, "Who am I?" Soft corn husk petal fallen in dirt. I forgive you, lost love. Two monks talking to the moon that isn't there. Steeples and garrets and city lights, and I'm just a fool. The silence of moist leaves on the track, and the child comes to in the station. 100 years ago, maybe, or in this very hour. The trains come and go with bodhisattvas and angels. The rain stops, starts, ceases again. I thought I heard someone say, "I love you." The child and man walking to the gate at the hill in no more rain, and no moon, and no tomorrow, and no yesterday either. These ones gathering without names together again, and the blackbirds call as the real moon appears on a cloudy night, just like that. So now I'll shift to a book of unknowing few years later. On the last day of our autobiography, in playing grass prayer, not here, the fine dust and hello, I'm leaving a personality, this quiet moon quest on the street outside the world continue itself, a song, the boy's passion, and inside the family gathering peaches in a bowl, candlelighted dinner for who would ever guess the final page, no gesture or breath, only love in the book we wrote, love, I will see you soon. Don't worry, nor don't, it is ours, and never yet beginning you see me, I'm thankful your life in giving over all this, thank you. No way, really, no way to really say love. Thank you. Thank you. The boy nowhere and here remembers when there was rain and constant tumbling in gray fields, spilling on apples and mice and leaves. Remember sounds of it, the sought nouns by a damp creek bed, an angle of eucalyptus almost stumbling over rocks and blackened hair, the mute girl, as the monks again assembled at the side of a barn showing 3 stones, remembering the dusk of our sleep, and afterwards the slight funneling of water in a medicine bottle. The boy remembers the act of remembering itself as 3 robins flutter into his words, and the word remembered now like childhood feigning and faraway children of rain remembering, while you look at the cliff and creek, see a trail and think, oh yes, I remember. This remembering too is our life. A rain in the fine darkness prompted the woman to pause by a train station lined with silver Christmas trees, where an orphan boy sang of the failed love he smelled on the tracks. And in this the woman turned and took his arm and went to the side of a room earlier, holding us back. Each had a flaw, and helped the other trade their clothes as a calm moved in trust, and as if a circle of coming out of this dark could be a place. The horse came into a clearing south of straw and dung, where the boy again awoke after fog, a painting of displaced branches, and a woman resting by oak touched the sides of his imagination. A call itself calling out, and ravens flew off as the boy buttoned a bloody shirt in the midst and damp of mountain air, the woman now appearing behind stones, asking, why are you afraid? Yet distinct elk finding them alone, and love in a painting, not love of this face, no, just the deaths of those who fell aside in a war no one ever finishes, and the painting leaning there, shared against the cave with the caged dictionary. Inside, the woman stepping forward, yes, beside creek and sleet, saying, you no longer look the same as when we first kissed, but this is not ours, nor ours this war. And in this he saw her eyes peeling back all he imagined as a child. The landscape and sea, a sky of whose story, wandering late into night and frightened, that God was in this place and didn't know it. Going forth from a sea you took to be my own life. A return in love and staring forth that everything we didn't have and no longer need. Mountains and seas, she might say, for instance, you wake up in a place where you were no hero. What is this blunder? Plums and apple leaf, jars of black beer, the unknown dust shifting down a precipice after fire, a monastery burning. It's a double-edged wine, after all. Even the word "the" in silence. Yet a worldliness is internalized, and we begin to believe our own deceptions. Leaves us heartsick on the open seas, changing shirts in a foreign tongue. When the story advances, it's always at a risk. But we can't survive without its advancing. Vanishing points in a narrative. So now I'll go to the next book. A few years later, You Are Everything You're Not. Who could blame or name or not hear the inanimate speaking through their wounded silence? If you were a word in the house of language, what would you do? The girl gestures towards little falcons into the tomorrow of naming the book. Who I am, listen. If only listening you would hear the end of a story and tells by bones of our master. Where would you go if you were an I in a story and the story only gave you one word? The stillness of dawn at night, leaving home, the boy utters. And this conversation suggests the house where they lived as he leans squarely into her shoulders. What if this were the first and last day of our birth? The girl now mounts to the one-eyed boy, climbing backward in toward the hut of our final speaking. In a story, there is never a beginning and end, whose voice traces itself in air while each autumn goes crisp. To speak of love, an untamed signature of words holds no yesterday or tomorrow, the ghost woman says, pages falling in around as she steps forward toward our heroes, hovering by the shadow of her own mother's photograph held up in one hand. But you keep your next foot next to the Buddha. She grins. uncounted moving past. So in this, what you say in birth is only an echo of the nearness of death unfolding inside and around us. And from Vanishing Acts. There are titles and such, but I'm not reading those. Who are you in this moment, this beat, this other, an Excel and girl walking the road and philosopher on the beach, the catch of air, the who and the are, and what is it in the movement, a gate, the finding of weeds and treasures and light rings and wait, or in waiting you, or are you, and what are you, or the boy in his muddy sneakers and jeans skipping behind the other days in memory. There it is again. Wow. Hey, nostalgia. Why does no one know your name? And coming back in a moment, a breath, a break, a bang over there, this bargain and beginning. And why not take it all in? Let it all disperse, erupt, exhale, an ocean, a fathom, a boy and girl entering the stream, and everyone bursting out in applause. What if you weren't so busy running around? Who would you bother then? What would you undo, and who bothers you when stones, stars, stalwart sky, and found water floods a bridge, sheared whistles, hoots, crow talk, and one-eyed boy on our ridge calling down, down, and down to dawn. Down to whom? Down to down. You, down, man, hey there, you. Do you know where you're going? Bag of old phones, blighted dusk, Aztec mask, country pigeons, and sawdust and hairs, where we are going? Scorpion in a foot, tarnished night, and why are you so busy, big black wolf? Mosquitoes on a log, worm on a hook, worm in a book, schedule in a box, worn out rocks. You should know there's one who's not busy. Right here, right up in here, this very cough. Listen, what is that sound and a stare in your body, in your ear, your fear, your heart, under eaves, under leaves? Can you hear it blurring, crush of loaves underfoot? Bees in a nook, blue jay on the way, child of our stray, broken bite, nuance in a crook, smoke run amok, elm and sycamore. What else? Why, you, bald mountaintop, wooden gate, a wooden boat, and a mute girl hoofing it the whole way, the treasure owl. Can you feel it? Just stop, sip your wine, no difference. Here we go, here we go, here we go, all being, no being, non-being, moon bleeding, beating calves, goofballs. Hey, bet you're good at tiptoeing, time, being, time, jolly, time, bum, time, but wait, do you think time is a thing? Something other than a walk in a park, a speech in a dark, a whisper, a curl, a sentence, some bird in a nest. Well, maybe you can be more intimate with your bowl, with the cook, with a ghost in your palm, like an awe, like an acorn, like a mute girl's call, or wind over cough. The flick last night, maybe you can hear her feet and yellow grass. Then that awesome, cool dive and splash goes the frog. the fish, the girl, the shivers, a boy, oh river, and dither, well, okay, well, you win. But can see all for flash, mad dash, a finger pointing at the moon, and all in your mind, nothing more. And listen, I'm here for you too. We're in this together. There never were two moons or two eyes. That's just a bunch of malarkey, hoopla, extravaganza. Maybe kidding around, that's fine for a while, sure, all right. But don't let anyone treat you bad, put you down, hang your chin, play you for dead. That's all about hoopla. Go ahead and be crazy. That's it, crazy. Just be crazy. Drop everything, all of it. It was just a spell anyway. Just a spell. Just a big fat phantom. Just a spell. Thank you.
I have been rummaging in my mind as to how to place the Ruth Lepson that I have in my heart before you as a working poet. Again, as a working poet is the way I do know her. Her lineage goes back to Stony Brook, which in my West Coast romanticized version of poetry was this incredible nest of poets bubbling and moving out across the nation, but it brought her into contact with certainly Robert Duncan, Robert Creeley, Vivi's Levertov, and a plethora of other people, George Basha. And she has always held, as she has worked around us as a working poet, this place in my mind and heart that has just been constantly expanding and as a presence working near us. I say she's a working poet. She works at New England Conservatory, which means she's teaching musicians, which to me is got, as a poet, this is a real job. You're then to be able to work with them. But slowly and surely, despite, I mean, she's been in my heart for a long time, but she has emerged in my intellectual mind as a place that is a repository for all that poetry, that is taking it in and digesting it and bringing it back out as very, very much work from her own heart. And she is somebody that we have come in Boston to consider to be not only a colleague, but somebody that we turn to and look for the heart that poetry is supposed to be, and the voice that poetry is supposed to be, and the love that poetry is supposed to be. So please welcome Ruth Lepson.
Introductions are always so far from expensive.
We need the mic closer to.
How's that? Is that better?
Yeah.
Can you hear me back there?
Yeah.
Okay.
That way.
Okay. How's that? Well, if I'm talking, yeah, perfect. How's that over there? Yeah. And luckily, Tomas is filming, and I want to say, the most gratifying part of the whole weekend is to see Tomas, who was filming Michael's son, who filmed all the readings in Somerville and recently moved here to go to college. So here he is again, and it seems like home somehow. So thank you, Michael, for that introduction. Thank you to Christopher and to Ed and to Lisa and everyone involved in organizing the reading. I'm in the process of putting together a new and selected poems, so I'm going to go back and read some ancient ones and then read fairly chronologically. And let me just take out my phone to keep it to a minimum. Well, maybe, Michael, you could just tell me when I've read for 15 minutes.
I'll throw something at you.
Yeah. Throw confetti. Okay. Claudia, the Cézanne in you, the beige in you, the could in you, the crab you picked in the pebbles, the sound paper sanding its time in you, your voice, Claudia, and melted caramel. Claudia, rust and solid. Claudia, the brown, not desert landscape in you. Claudia, the thin hair, too thin for your thickness, Claudia. Claudia, the hugging stirring you, the fatigue halting you. Claudia, the CLAU belong to you, the D, your blue eyes. Maine is the name of the state for you. You fit, Claudia. Fit in the state like a chunk in Arizona, too. The coral and salmon and beige in your dreams. The people you pick, they are black-haired, not Claudia, not like you, Claudia. Your voice half an octave lower than most. The clouds pass over you, laud you, you click. The ranch and the cattle and the rancher are you who own yourself. And that's what you suit your taste to. Living is separate for you. And you pick two to give to, and one always stays and one always goes. And Claudia, away I went, still warmly and always to come back to you. Claudia, as you have painted me, I want to paint you, Claudia. Barricades, which begins with an epigraph from the surrealist poet Benjamin Bray. Activity is not an illusion, comfort but the readjustment of seasons. Illusion is a primary activity. We would hold on to one another if we could. What hurts, what heals, then what takes you away. What you do with where you came from. Are you asking the right questions? Your eyes hurt, your hands are cold, you are actively waiting. The barricade is going to fall again soon. For what? In back of the pleasing barricade lies the warmth of pain, a barricade of panic behind that, filtering the world. And behind panic comes momentary peace, the possibility of developing. But the effort is always difficult to the same degree. You move away, yet you turn toward it. The tune this time is not yet audible, not yet clear. The time, the tune, the kind change with change, but the effort always contains the same degree of possibility. The Philosopher's Stone. Mesmerized, I'm earth, air, water. Here by a loud and sable fire, I find a blue and white snakeskin, a rainbow dissolving, lemon and sugar, the edge of his lip. Oh, I see now it's not the fire I've wanted to be, but the wood. The fire is in its late fall. Smell of burnt pyramids, zebra stripes, the odor of burnt ozone, fluid coils, the touch of burnt winds. To the left, white coral, in the center, black velvet, crushed velvet and gold sequin trim, brains and snails to the right, in back, flies and Tyrannosaurus rex. The embers glow so deep, at the end, a slug looks on from the sea of the fireplace. Its eyes are not alive, are white discs that move when people sleep. The embers glow so shrill, unnatural. These trees. After I've left, these trees, their insistent green humming, will shine, and all my emotions will have been just that, mine. Swampscott Hour. Seagulls, excuse me, seagulls spread out in a line by the water's edge, a string of lights unraveling. Ducks, dark as darkest rocks, form a circle in the sea. On the drive home, sun huge, its reflection white gold on telephone wires. Something turning into something new. Cool wind, something old. Black birds fly, black stars in a white sky. For the dead. Coming back from vacation, I passed a cemetery with a sign that read, "Pray for us." I had thought that if anything, they were praying for us. Now the black hollow notes of Shostakovich, September, and the oval leaves of the locust, matter of fact, push me to work. Maybe in purgatory, a woman waits for us to lift the shadow that falls on her, the shadow we can still move in this changeable place. Maybe all we can do for the dead is give up our poses, since after life there is no more silence over a meadow. There are no sparrows whose explosion into the sky sends a ripple through our patient bodies. This is called Motet for Mom, and so it's my mother speaking some of the time after she got dementia, and me speaking, and there are a few other characters in the poem as well. What would you like for Mother's Day? Did you hear the word nothing? I wish I could wave a magic wand and make you feel better. You are magic. When you're here, it's magic. You say such sweet things. I say such sweet things because I have sweet thoughts. I don't like your blouse. My darling daughter, do you think about Dad a lot? Not a little and not a lot. Do you like the video about the history of the Jews? It's not a question of liking it or not liking it. I'll do whatever you think I should. Do you like it a lot when I come to visit? It's not out of this world. Why not? It's in the world. Are you thinking about your life? Mm-hmm. You're such a devoted daughter. When you get a lot of food, it makes you happy. Want to keep reading Henry Moore? That's enough. It's not so interesting. You can take it away. The television has the word lifetime on it. I'm tired. I don't feel like sleeping. It looks ridiculous to call this picture Lifetime. Go home soon. It's enough. I don't feel good now. I don't want any more. I won't say anything. I'll just rest. Who's that? That's somebody on TV, Mom. There must be 1,000 people here. We're in the emergency room, Mom, and it's crowded. Chippy Cookie, I shall depart and go home. This Henry Moore sculpture doesn't impress me. What's so funny? Do you believe in God, Mom? A little. Do you like the snow, Mom? Yes, I like the snow. Do you? Yes. It's a white world. Enjoy the day. What are you coughing for? I have a cold. It's nothing, Mom. It doesn't have to be something. I became a mathematician when I started thinking about mathematics. How old are your boys, Franca? 3 and 6. Bring the 6-year-old. Do you love me because I'm your mother or because I'm lovable? I could eat chocolate all day long. Actually, it's not true. You cannot eat chocolate all day long. I'm lucky I opened my eyes. You could never come to visit enough. This chocolate cake is heavenly. It's good for us both to see each other, especially if there's also chocolate involved. Whatever you have in your house is yours. Mom, what are you thinking about? You ask too much of a person. Mom, what are you thinking about lately? Set theory. Mom, what are you thinking about these days? I'm thinking about my past and about your past. Mom, what are you thinking about? The weather. What do you think about? Everything that happens at that moment. The poem of Jay, after Harold Bloom and David Rosenberg's The Book of Jay. I asked A about it. He laughed and said I already knew about it. Still, he didn't seem to realize my problems were with me. I asked B about it and she was very upset and said my life was hard and her life was hard. I asked C about it and her answer was very interesting and well put, but I couldn't apply it to me. So I asked D about it and he spent many years giving me the answer little by little, but at this rate I'll never get it. I asked E about it and he made some disparaging remark and wanted to talk about money. I asked F about it, she didn't want to talk about it. I asked G about it and we had a very intense conversation, after which he disappeared and never came back. I asked H about it, but there was a question of confidence that got in the way over and over again. So I called I about it, since of all the people I know, he seems to know most about it. But by the time I reached him, I was tired and couldn't sustain the conversation. Finally, I talked to Jay about it, who was dying this year and who didn't feel very much in his life, and invented a persona more consciously than most of us, and he said he hoped he'd find feeling and learn to love and learn to die. I wished him luck, and he was astonished that I was crying, since we had been out of contact for years, but now all that had angered me seemed petty. Even a trillion, even hell, even yellow, even slaughter, even Sam, even jail, even lost, even sea, even technology, even every good boy, even Burns, even tents, even culpable, even terms, even boats, even gunships, even jewel, even cruel, even good, even plain, even uniform, even horizon. Directly in front in the same plane, exactly adjusted, not inclining, rank and number, game of chance. Even divisible, one's like or equal, precisely or just close at hand. That is to say, points of difference. Even tempered, even clad, even out, level with, bringing down, even up, ever impute, ever come up to, even me, even you. Some of you may know the jazz musician Steve Lacy, and this is an elegy for him. Eased away from the squeeze play, so no more squealing, no more squiggles, so no more squib kicks or brackets or brambles or crawfish. And after dinner, just a squad room squelching squalor, no sputter, squamation, or sprocket. Not a sprinkler or even a sprig, no more gigs, no great spotlight, never more a spree, just a sprag, not some spunky, no more donkey, just some wheels, not a single springtail or springhead in sight, just spring fever early at night, nor sprawl, not a spokesman or a spondee left, a split second nor one spiring, and even a spire, nothing splashy, never splendid, not a spinnaker, no brown nor a prism stilt spiccato, no sphinx, spellbound or a sphere, no more spells, spats or chaps or spasm, not another carnival, and no more of that great mocha job. And some of you know the poet Loren Niedecker. So, surprisingly enough, I had a dream I was her. I dreamt I was Loren Niedecker walking home from the hospital. The sky was whitish gray. Noticing weed and branch along the way. In church, I wore a pillbox hat, carried a modest purse, saw every bit of life there advance. And this for the great Robert Creeley, whom I love to visit in Mount Auburn Cemetery, have little conversations with him about the English landscape there and how he's doing, and tell him how other people are doing. Really, Creeley? Were you alive at one time? Who visits your burial site? I do. So do lots of others. Were you married? Impossible query. Complex as a bee and a flower simultaneously. You had it all. Still lingered in sadness sometimes. Only one eye with it saw like a salamander with your existential why. Bye-bye, I say it over and over. I ask if you enjoyed the English landscape in Mount Auburn Cemetery, where we walk and where they put you on the tour. Even in death, you're on the tour. My. That's it. I'm done. Yeah.
It is my considerable pleasure to be able to introduce to you Michael Nauen. He has numerous books. He has gotten many awards. In his, compared to me, short life, he is rather famous. And it is a great pleasure to have him here with us. Michael is, on the one hand, of course, very much an investigator of language. His poems are really about the origins of meaning, the origins of deeper than that, sensibility. And he is also very much interested in what we once called multiculturalism, which has expanded much beyond that. He's a terrific poet, and you're going to find out why in a few moments. But let me just simply say that when I first learned that I would be introducing him, I began to wonder about his name. I thought, I wonder if it has to do with lion. And so I investigated it, and I thought, no, it doesn't. It doesn't have that to do at all. In fact, it is a very well-known name in the Far East. And investigated a little further, I said, well, okay, well, what does it mean? And so I got into that, and I found out that among its various meanings, actually, perhaps its most significant meaning is bridge. It is a bridge. And that, after all, is exactly what a poet is. It is a bridge, creates a bridge for us so that we were able to go beyond whatever we encounter in the immediate world into something new. And in that, I can say that Michael Nauen is very accomplished.
Thank you so much, Ed, for that introduction. It was really neat. And thank you to the organizers of this reading. Thank you to the poets. It's a pleasure to share the mic with you. Thank you to you listeners. I'm going to read a few pieces from Words on Edge, which came out last spring. And there were couple of Bush-era poems last night, so I figure I should read my Trump poem. This was called Ignition Compendium, and there's an epigraph. Word of the year 2016. For Merriam-Webster, surreal trumps fascism. And that's a headline from The Guardian. And apparently in 2016, Merriam-Webster was afraid that fascism would be the word of the year. So they were, I guess, relieved that it was actually surreal. I like to think that there's an allegorical significance of surreal trumping fascism. So the way I wrote this poem, I inserted the word surreal, I inserted the word Trump, and then the word fascism into Google search, and then I collaged some of the results. It's a technique that's associated with Flarf poetry. Ignition Compendium. To wake late in the not too distant 20th century to the fragrance of the digital future on fire. It started with the lifelong quest of the ancients to pass judgment on the abstract use of music and voting machines. They who perished in the name of long-term contradiction say cinema will not be the word of the year. La palabra en inglés is anonymous. La Lupita says that the evening star will arrive thrashing over the church spire, and the so-called drain event will bring an enigmatic, almost 1930s resonance into the street. Now you are browsing the weird infrastructure of yesterday's dreams, to shade black ice from subway rails, to rescue the single lumen that's been knocking on the door from inside the dark archive. What emerges has come to undo the nails of recreational fascism, riling children to tag the wall with pragmatic blues, with a new and creepy end to revolutionary tangent number 5. EU-style expert warns rear-view victory could legitimize luxury after tragedy. A flumdiddle of southern spice and discontent echoes the narrative drumbeat of capitalism. Video, My Little Pony Empire trumps Trump-style security conference. Video, unstoppable F-35 stealth fighter trampled by Harajuku-style puppy. In his online address, Trump was announcing 4 more years of a year-round coup against Death Star's dystopia. We are going to build that politically bigly brothel and make the academic anarchists pay for it. Moving into view, the large and menacing turkey head started to feed on what was left of the white saccharine mush of America. Caught between his slapstick, tech-altered hat and his intractable trickle-down toupee, the corpse of November continues protesting. So a somewhat more playful poem now. It's called Menu in Chinglish. And I wrote it after I read an article in the Times called, it was something like Shanghai is trying to untangle the mangled Chinglish of, the mangled English of Chinglish. And it was about how Shanghai was trying to prepare for the World Expo and correct mistranslated signage. There was a kind of over-reliance on translation software. My brother used to live in Shanghai and he knows that I like this kind of stuff, so he would send me like a snapshot of an ATM machine and it would say cash recycling machine. So in this article there was, it was an item on the menu. So that's the first line of the poem. It was supposedly on a menu. And the rest of the menu I made up. So Menu in Chinglish, and this is dedicated to John Yao, who published this book and who runs Black Square Editions. Monolithic tree mushroom stem squid. Braised rainbow mangrove moth. double-pronged rhizome berry pig sniper, shepherd's sponge spigot, beef cheek ricochet, preserved duck eggplant implosion, pungent heliotrope of oyster pouch, salted forehead belly blossom, chicken web monad broth, silver fin swimming membrane flavor, retinal eel matrix, bamboo vertigo, triple tongue cocoon in tube sauce, gluteal libidinal shrimps. So the last thing I'll read from this book before I turn to more current material is it's a long poem. It's called The Philosophy of Decomposition, Recomposition as an Explanation, a Poe and Stein mashup. So as you could probably intuit from the title, I've taken the Poe essay, The Philosophy of Composition, and I essentially kind of spliced it with the famous Gertrude Stein lecture, Composition as Explanation. It's a long poem. It's about 40 pages. I'm just going to read the very little, a little bit of the beginning. Between the marble and the plumage is a capable difference, a never-ending interval within which is a long book about 1,000 pages that is beginning again and again. It is an enormous poem quoting itself, a non-reasoning creature capable of speech. The fluttering of its pages made a monotone of sound, a sound so prolonged that it seemed like one long, vacillating thought. It was a radiant discourse that began to emerge, step by step, from night's beguiling academies, like a classic 19th century midnight, unexpectedly thought by some 20th century mind. It was an unimaginable but inevitable series, interspersed with ancient pages on which were written 99 indefinite stanzas, 104 lines in red and black paint, an outlawed history, pallid and ludicrous portraits of melancholy, a continuous dialogue between anybody and everybody, and an ecstatic geography of intuition. From page to page, there was a groping for life, as if the book, which had an intense frenzy, not for identity, but for repetition and variation, determined to have the self-consciousness of a catalectic window. I am also a magazine, it said, a lyric colloquy, a sonorous novel, the painting of a narrative without a plot. As I said in the beginning, the most poetical topic in the world is unquestionably the death of a denouement, of a troubling equilibration beginning again and again. I am preparing, in fact, to become a new composition, to retrace the generation of 1914 with a Plutonian difference. For this, I made troublesome stepladders that lead from a cautious future to its requisite pretext, or less pedantically, from a beautiful picture to its tempestuous frame. I determined to place a deepening impression on impossible paper, just as the amused world rendered the inarticulate difference between words and other words as a vigorous and ominous jest. It was then that I wrote desire, while meaning desideratum, that I prepared to seek, or should I say borrow, the modus operandi of radical combination. What I have termed subjects are really depressions, memories of a lonely idea beginning to rhyme. This inevitably led me to a long, groping analogy that allies spirit with sonorousness, you with another world, and the sensitive reader with the sad and placid variations of the day. But shall we commence? A wandering vowel is now expecting the pages and is tapping continuous trochees upon my door. In this naturally elaborated beginning, what is seen depends upon the classical ratio of story and shadow, of dreaming and continually annoying the limits of the real. For what we term paradise is essentially a neglected echo happening ahead of time. In a word, it is going to be there, and we are here. As is supposed, the ordinary will continually advance toward the first unusual instance, but not find it. Like the way life always seems to know, but misrepresent the equilibrated design of living. So one finds oneself, pen in hand, before the smiling casement of the paper, beginning in indolent stanza, seeking ungainly admission into its emblematical forest of oddity. And if one does not enter, the portraits of the dead will make an immediate and ghastly volte-face. Perhaps there is nothing to be done in this discarded atmosphere, but irritating their dark, mathematical eyes, the very place, the confounded locale where all works of art should begin. So I'm going to turn to a long poem in progress. It's called Disorientations. And the premise is that I've taken two Orientalist texts and I've disoriented them and combined them and kind of mashed them up to create kind of third thing. The first text is a book of essays by Roland Barthes called Empire of Science. The book it's at once brilliant but highly problematic. Essentially, Barthes has these short essays about characteristically Japanese topics, haiku, sumo, tempura, and he's advancing essentially a post-structural position. He says that Japanese cuisine is food-centered, and then most problematically, in my opinion, he says the Asian face shows that in Asia there's not a metaphysics of death because of the Asian eyelid, not the eye leads to the soul, but it's a metaphysics of surface, which for Roland Barthes is a good thing, but it's kind of unfortunate that it's probably the most objectionable part of his Orientalism. The second text is called is a book called Double Flowering from the Notebooks of Araki Yasusada, and in the 90s, these poems started to appear in literary journals, apparently by a poet who survived the blast at Hiroshima, had family members die. This guy named Araki Yasusada, and some of these poems circulated in high-profile journals, and then it came out that actually it was written by a white American guy, and it was a kind of major scandal in the poetry world at the time. There's no attribution in the book, but Kent Johnson wrote the poems. It was published by Ruth after I think Wesleyan was supposed to publish it, and they kind of pulled the contract when they found out it was a hoax. So this poem Disorientations is in a way kind of it's me trying to figure out what I think about these two texts. I like aspects of both, although I have to say I think the Roland Barthes is far more brilliant. I guess the last thing to say is that it's a long poem, there's several sections. The sections are not titled, and it's a mixture of verse and prose. We know that the ridiculous Big Bang of philosophy severed difference from difference, but an unsuspected dream trailed interestingly behind in the aftermath. A vision of a head, gazing, ecstatic-like, that can turn the chief concepts of our Occidental fathers into stone. Its Chinese eyes and other starred features of subversion suggest and undo us, cause certain Greek letters to appear in the superficial references of our manuscripts. Constrained by a formal topology, we displace our own subject's upturned person in impossibilities, permitting us to perceive the youngest formulations of modern experience. An enormous new chapter that under no circumstances could be presented in any American or Aristotelian novel. As if to understand the powerful shock of a divine and inconceivable reality in a friend's turnip patch, to discover a whole realm in which everything totters and opens up. How beneficial to us it would be to descend into the buried articulations of late December, a fictive notion of nature muffling the vulgarity of manifest meaning, speech without language, utterance without tongue. Under active but unknown signs, principal communication was altogether refracted, the dark hair of history pulled up by the root. In the dream, we were transported on the back of the wolf god, her dense, transparent coat hemorrhaging speech. She said the great beings from above can only return by descending the torso of our fragmented languages and lodging at the very bottom limits of our cultural phenomena. She said the beings would be sly and in a more radical way, without attribute, that we must drive them out and clench their virgin emptiness with the awkward emptiness of the page. She said they had enclosed the transitive sphere of subjectivity in hundreds of enclitics, in a complexity of compassionate delays. Thus, our alibi was precisely outside the functional structure of verbs to be. Faced with the final level of meditation, we intended to animate certain repetitions that were archaeological, yet without origin, to ride on aberrant dreams which blossomed after the assigned reality of 1945. It was before ideology held our story in immaculate parentheses, comfortably diluting the foreign and the referential without knowing the differences of the many fictive flowers diffracted through the landscape. Then the palm readings required of us to destroy the image of excess in the empty envelope, to translate the knowledge of Dhyana into the grammar of tears. Our voice somehow less human in our animal gullet. We, the living suffixes, the absurd survivors of once upon a time. Dear abolished subtext, since the night of the full moon, there has been an auditory film rising and falling about the city school, a great evangelical babble, old recordings of a hostile interrogation, and a murmuring radiation of ink. With no respite, there has been a serious bombing of normality. Nonetheless, there was no way all the boxes of special forms and affidavits were simultaneously real and in our imagination. Or were they? As you well know, sometimes it's a time of its own. So last night, gazing at the night sky's stars, flowering in italics, we masked our eyes with a hint of hysteria, half sleep after all, being the most delicious criticism of reason. We muttered to you a faint but extended veneration, heavily quoting the Opacity Sutra and the doubled sutra of the damaged interstice. Is it not the voice which is sown into the soul of the body? Is not the body the exchange of regional gestures, an instant of respiration, opening in time? Such are the codes of the autumn empire, illegible in distance and their approximate location. Such is the sickness of anonymous vertigo, of drinking the emptiness of winter without words. Delivered entirely from practical communication, we suffered an otherworldly worldliness, a sweeping sorrow of alienations. It was that discontinuous hour in which the other's death is necessarily consummated, in which snow, curiously falling, touches the blotched curl of Yasusada's smile. Then a pain, pure in its origins, welled up around the infantile half-walls of our vanity. Without explaining, a foreigner in mid-1960s clothing placed strips of handwritten stationery and a few lotus leaves in the middle of our home, a sort of quilt of protection against the original, unknown dampness that is still acclimating at the heart of the real. A mass of ears copied from French pornographic drawings populated the sky, receiving but without appropriately trying to grasp the full-time emphasis of Yasusa's language. Written over the dawn in immense particle characters, the message dissolved in miles of undated light. If they were to be spoken, the names of the departed would be swallowed by some illegible narrative, mailed but never sent, yearned for but extinguished, like traces of the closest paper cut on the most western regions of your tongue. Please write to me when you can, you, the savored one, or whoever happens to be speaking from beyond the ruins of our intelligence. We were eating the liver from the poet's embalmed body and holding up his unnaturally large heart when you said the towering assemblage, the volatile conglomerate that is identity, is also a stick in the mud by which to tell the time. To name its destination is a contradiction of substance. It is to call out at random into symbolic space through a mouthful of rusty coins. After the operation, you elaborated the idea that whiteness is not actually a color, but a kind of reified surface on which an entire palette of sociality is translated, but not fully defined. Once cut, knowledge, stamped with what it itself cannot conceive, sinks only to touch the delicate partition of the living. Only then can it rise, soaked and thus preserved in the sultry bouillon of language, in the recuperated soup in which one chanced to find an aqueous tear spilt as an exquisite condiment of grief. It is the instrumental hour of aeration, before a detachable hand emerges from the primary text and gestures for you to immediately pinch yourself, to discover in your body a tiny kernel of antinomic transformation. But like spring flowers wrapped in a January newspaper, the structures plucked from your systematics of consequence no longer provided proper alimentation for the literary labor that remains. A slight orange and brown stain was shellacked on the workbench, and the direction of longing, which was introduced before through a free alternation, was fixed. We gazed beyond the piles of hair in the plaster garden, finding a proliferation of artificial light. A secret geisha was now somehow among us, an unknown person deeply engaged in what the granular photo can reveal. So you compose the various fragmented prefectures into a giant dome of condolence, a landmark for what still floats, or what is fortuitously permitted within the shifting radius sweep of the season. In the dream, the fascist counts the open graves. 1, 2, 3, 4. But it is useless. In the hall of his hotel, there are, strangely enough, sounds of a barber. Later, over his motionless hand, a moth fans its wings. Your writing is mere dust in the urn of representation, black calligraphy that only becomes clear against a black page. If only we could be traveling beyond the incomplete rendezvous of division and cohesion rather than be drifting within it, then we might simultaneously light the edge of the paper and carry its warmth before the ring of the ceremony comes undone. The body, now offered, is on the table, that profound space for gaudy vacillation, for awkward meetings, for remote nutrivity and visual interplay, for the pure instance in which tea takes on the perfect form of its teapot. Language is a wandering tributary. How to describe the simple happiness that is to fish in its thick, irreducible ink? to look at as a magical elixir its apprehended elements, a foreign word, fragmented sentences of guarded speech, an embarrassing utterance, filaments of what was written, and here and there, a shimmer of the signifier. Though your lexicon always has to find relief and so be consumed in cremation, the fire's kabuki-like rarity appears to sheath it as the moon is enveloped and figuratively cleansed by the endless arms of space. To be a poet is to open bent and undated mail, not addressed to you. What is the poem but a cupping and then scattering of grass, the somewhat amateurish breaking and flowering of emptiness? For writing is precisely the act which unites the weightless things of the universe with the simple cut of the blade. Dear buried resistances, I sent you a few notebooks written by a man who unsigned his identity, only to see it appear again, tethered to the fibrous emptiness of his language. Look at how the manipulated smoke rings are throwing a slippery light on his frontispiece. You might have said to him that 45 minutes was clearly not enough for the slowness of ingestion, for Saturday to exhaust its prefectural impressions. To feign another color is slow, difficult work, no longer taboo or regressive for the softening stations of the painter's eye. But our suspicion of the essential cannot afford losing sight of the soggy distance between east and west, of the carbon thud slap that is essentially the consequence of his ideological blossom. Even without a center or heart, flesh is fundamentally marked as it becomes hidden behind layers and layers of calligraphic or tutelary ornament. It still sends, sometimes without first saying so, its intended regards. Though it is mostly uniform belief that a poet is never constrained by the drafts in her fictive portfolio, I wonder if he, the man in question, thought at all about the other way around. Here, everything is a source, and everything subtly bears the maternal pressure of parentheses. Yours is a depth detached of all surrounding, becoming substance, like an instrument that refuses to cut pieces of polished stone from the summer glare of mountains. But I'm sure you realize that, on the pure level of praxis, photographs mutilate the promise of light. Thus much would come of the elastic time of chrysanthemums, of the brief and finely measured paper of the wrestler's cigarette. Are you excited as I? The food for our jotted possibilities is on the table. I will send it to you soon. It was Emily Dickinson, who proposed that the alphabet is a series of fragments with which one can place side by side what was, and what will be. Don't you think that it is also the same in Japanese? For originality to be transferred to its interminable translations, inspiration has to select moments that can pass back through an impeccable itinerary of rivers. It is in its adolescent nature to repeat itself as a long, uninterrupted text or a secret hat dance from Hiroshima. The decentered medium, once started, unites a single time, that of its fabrication and that of its consumption, into one plum-colored impulse. That is to say, we converse without the indirect accompaniment of conversation. Perhaps our death has been previously written in an elaborate anthology of sugar, a pinch which the divinity sometimes samples with vital pincers. As you know, the past is merely the recognizable bones of the moment, and each month is but an echo, seasoning, then sponging up our undated ink. Please write soon. And this is the last section of this long poem in progress. Without looking at his neighbor, each player releases a ball of paper into the vertical hive. Numerous machines receive it with the most extreme precision and propel the ball through a series of baffles. Each ball emerges outside the photograph, propelled by its own instrumental lightness of rendezvous. It is one of the curious wartime customs to denote that our bearings mean absolutely nothing to the Pines' indifference, that the great unknown has varied clientele. Like Zen meditation, it is both collective and solitary, unless the middle-aged men in the yellow tunics start confusing the stupidity of the student with that of the teacher, in which case the original teacher-student protocol of 1944 is at best unclear. The most important thing is that the group plays for the sake of the factory, with all turnovers going to the weird whirring beneath the business suit. The players know the game has ended after the dense egg of fat is somewhat cohesive, or the urn, placed imperfectly in the morning parlor, is full of black rain. Thank you very much.
We'll take a 5-minute break. Our next reader, I think it might be a smart idea to introduce the introducers. I know so many of you, but I know that there are others that don't know, and therefore you may not know who we are. And what we constitute what is called the Pioneer Valley Poetry Productions, and it's a nonprofit which we formed several months ago to do such activities as we're doing tonight. And my ideal objective eventually is that we become a Tanglewood for poetry. Now that may seem pretty ambitious. Well, it is, of course. But that's where I want to be eventually. And I want us to have our own campus, our own building, and our own events. And that's a future that we're going to aim for. So anyway, so the people who have been introducing the readers this evening include first Chris Sawyer-Lozano, sitting over here. And Chris, like all of us, is himself a poet and a very admired one. I mean, I'm looking for the appropriate adjective, and great, let's put that. And then there's Michael Franco, who's the guy sitting here. And Michael has a very successful reading series at his home, actually, in Somerville, Massachusetts. And he has been active in the poetry community, or poetry communities, actually, of both California and Massachusetts as well, going back decades. He is almost as old as I am. But anyway, and so that brings me to me, of course, and you know, I'm Ed Foster. And, well, what can I say? It's who I am. And unfortunately, Lisa Bourbeau could not be here, and she is the fourth member of the team and has been responsible for many of the things that we undertake, and it's deeply regretted by us all that things came up in her life that made it impossible for her to be here this weekend. And of course, as I think I mentioned last night, there's another person, that's Patrick Pritchett. And he was critical in the initial formation of Pioneer Valley Poetry Productions, but he has now left and is living in China. And conceivably, he's living there forever. I mean, it seems to be, it is a tenure-track position, and all of the emails I've heard from him so far suggest that he is very, very happy there. I'm upset that he's happy. There's not much I can do about that part. So anyway, so that brings me to our next reader, who is Elinor Nauen. And a few personal things here. For a long, long time, I have thought of the Poetry Project at St. Mark's Church as being another home for me. And in the development of time, meet more and more and more people. And of course, there are some fantastic poets that come out of the Poetry Project, like Alice Notley, for example, or Anne Walton, and on and on and on. And Elinor Nauen is among them. And she, well, you're going to find out, so I'm not going to tell you more about that. She'll let you know herself. But let me tell you this. She has an interest in snow. Now, I grew up in this area, and therefore I know a lot about snow. And basically, it is to be conquered. I used to be on the ski team, and one of the great things was we would ski jump, and pow! You feel free, but of course you have to be in perfect control. I have cousins, who ski all the time. Through marriage, I have another who is, as a matter of fact, on the Olympic ski team, very famous, actually very famous skier, and so forth and so on. But I was reflecting on this, and I was thinking, there really is a difference between what we're doing and what Elinor does. And that is, basically what we're doing is we're surviving winter. We're finding ways to use winter, to skate, to ski, whatever the case may be, in order that the spring is going to come eventually, and then we're going to think, oh, wow, good, we made it again. But Elinor looks at snow in a real sense. What is snow? What is the word snow? How can we use it? And building catalogs, constructions, references, and so forth and so on, teaches me more about snow than I ever would learn by going off the jump when the skiing down this slope. So, with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Elinor Nauen.
I don't think I'm even going to read one word about snow today. Sorry, Ted. But well, thank you. Thanks for having me and the rest of the readers, and thanks especially to Ed, who's, if you don't know, has always been a tireless supporter of poetry and lover of poetry and poets, and that's something I have always appreciated about you, Ed. And he published my most recent book, and I'm going to start right out with the title poem, Now That I Know Where I'm Going. I'll never be a junkie, because I can't stand menthol cigarettes. A novelist, since I sleep like a fat pig. I'll never be a speed freak, because I hide the bottle and forget where it is. A great lover, because I make jokes in bed. When I dress for success, they send me to the moon, till I remember there's a game on. And I'll never be a big home run hitter for the Sox. Why not? Why not? Because I throw like a girl, and I can't hit the ball. If I go get the operation that gives me great cheekbones, I'll still have to get the one that puts my eyes farther apart. And I'll still never be a great actress, because I only know how to faint and disrobe. I'll never live in Paris, because the French live there. I'll never have a baby, because they've never let me name her Ford. I can't be a milkman, because people would make rude jokes. Or garbage man, because I couldn't stand to throw all that perfectly good stuff away. I'll never be queen for a day, because they took it off the air. So suck my dick, and I don't even have one. I'm only going to be funny for about 2 minutes. Sorry. Well, Ed and I have a plan to go to a baseball game. He's never been to a baseball game, if you can believe that. So I'm going to read, and I'm a big baseball fan, so you'll see. Game 4, American League Championship Series, October 12th, 1985. Bases loaded, no outs, and pitching on a mere 2 days rest. Dave Steve looks so desperate I chew my fingers as though at a Stephen King movie. I can't watch alone, so call Steve, who's sleeping. But amazingly enough, Marion has the game on. Not, however, imagining poor Dave is as hounded as he looks to me. Talk turns to tomorrow's reading. Oh man, he just walked in a run. I haven't really been watching, you understand, typing all day. Nothing like a reading to burrow for poems. Steve's a little depressed, Marion says. He has to finish all his poems. Yeah, I agree. I have about 1 million works that are terrific to late innings, then stop short. I'm getting a stomachache watching Steve claw around for help. And so is born another $1 million scheme. The relief poet will come in at the end with a trick pitch, witty, poignant heat, and finish off your poem, tidy up your poem, getting credit for a save, of course. Then I remember for Marion, the incredibly short shortstop the Royals used to have was Freddie Patek, and we two happy geniuses hang up as Tom Hankey comes in to get the inning's last out. Okay, so this is the title poem of a previous book, American Guys. This is a new one selected, by the way, so that's why I'm recycling previous poems. American Guys. Jack, John, Ben, and I play pool. Polish bar, 7th Street. How is it? Guys all know how to shoot pool. I sure don't. Hit 'em low, Ben says. I sink 3 in a row. Never done that before. Johnny walks in. I light up. Jack, John, and Ben drink beer. Johnny, ale. Are we solid? I ask again. That was on your tombstone, John says. I swill Rolling Rock. No one smokes, but the bar is smoky. The bartender throws quarters in the jukebox. I dance alone. Satisfaction. I never had so many boyfriends until I got married. They loved me for being happy elsewhere. Jack scratches. I used to know how to play this game, he says. Johnny hits him hard. He too's done this before. I let the guys tell me what to do next. For once, I'm the girl. They line them up. I love American Guys, saved from knowing anything except keep one elbow up, skittering toward a side pocket. Sad poem. And someone in those lights, miles below, is looking up and saying, look down, and see me. This is slightly longer, so I will prepare by doing a magic water trick. No safety. All that hate me whisper together against me. Against me do they plot my death. Yes, my old friend, who I trusted, who ate my bread, has lifted up his heel against mine. That's from Psalm 41. 1. I pick my friends according to whether they would hide me. Once you're betrayed, it's too late to choose better. Jews like to argue who was worst, the French. In 1940, 5 million wrote poison pen letters denouncing individual Jews. No, the Austrians. Hitler, Eichmann, Waldheim, all Austrians. No, the Romanians, who outraged even the Germans when they failed to bury the bodies of those they murdered. The war lost, some Nazis jumped into Stripes and Yellow Star. The Russians shot them all the same. Some Jews survived death camps and went home, and the Poles shot them. Their neighbors, the Poles, their neighbors shot them. Why bother to shoot the dead? 2. After Theresienstadt, is it obscene to sing? Unseemly to be alive when such effort was made to stomp their bones? They say we Jews still here. My dear little father ran rather than give over his bad, gold-filled teeth. The Jews are historians. Remember, in every generation some rose against us, but we were saved. Who saved us? Who saves me? What happens to one happens to all. If my aunt is killed, where are her bones? Hopeful and over-obedient, they and we, the scared and the slow, neglected political and military science, and so were twice naked. The voice of history divides the flame of fire. We don't conquer, we merely persevere. How long will the world look on, gnashing upon me with my teeth, my babies, my children? It's so hard to raise the dead. 3. I am a Jew. I announce this, so I won't hear what I do hear when people don't guess. So I can't be a coward, so I can't deny anything. No way out. When I stay silent, my bones wax old through my roaring all the day long. But my mother is English. Doesn't that make me half wasp? Shouldn't I be more tactful? No one wants to hear it. Why don't I shut up? No one wants to hear it, and why should they? I wasn't there. They weren't there. They didn't do it. The voice of history divides my flame from the fire. The necromancers arouse themselves with the bones of the dead. They warm the bones with their bodies. They insert the bones into their nostrils. They incite the bones to answer their questions. I shout at the bones until I am hoarse. It would have done no good to protest. They would have only have turned on us. This way, at least we got a case of good wine out of it, a country house, when the old owners suddenly decided to leave the country. The Jews have only their history. We must remember, but why should we live for the dead? The irony of history divides the flames of fire. I am cursed with memory. My life is spent with grief, and my years with sighing. My bones are consumed. No safety. That's all I'm trying to say. Next time, take me first. I already know as much as I need to. 4. Why these resentments? Didn't my friend's husband say he couldn't believe I am a Jew? And didn't he mean he likes me and he doesn't like Jews? And aren't I flattered to be told I'm not like them? Aren't I flattered to be my own person, not the product of a people half as old as time? One must forgive one's enemies, but not before they have been hanged. Freud, quoting Heine. 5. My friends think it's strange I carry 3 passports. My money's in jewels. My bags are packed. I pick the friends I pray will hide me. Once you're betrayed, it's too late. I am cursed with memory. The flames divide me from my past. And where can I go from here? Here's another poem about my dad. That's sort of the how Hans became an American. I've been sitting at my desk a lot, staring at my father. It's a picture taken in summer, a few months before he died. He's looking at me with a wry and knowing, did he know, expression. He looks like a man who needs a private joke to get a proper snapshot. He's looking straight at me, even as I sit in a cold May, a little too tired, the Yanks getting beat 4-1 in the 5th by Oakland out on the coast, a lackluster, they'll never catch up game. Rasmussen not getting shellacked, just doesn't have anything, and neither do the hitters. Gone native in his Arizona retirement, Dad is wearing a bolo tie that looks shrunken, frail. I liked to kiss him on the top of his bony head in the desert mornings. He took all of us to a game only once, my first. I was 10, Charlie was 8, Lindsay was 12, and the baby was left home. We drove all the way from South Dakota up to Minneapolis to see the Twins play the Yankees, my team. Daddy was a refugee from Nazi Germany, and Mom was English. They were grown-ups who'd never seen a game either. They went because he was the father of Americans, and I was a little baseball fanatic. Mom sat quietly for about 20 minutes, fanning herself with a straw sun hat and beaming. Then asked, "When does the game begin?" "Look down there," we said. It was already the second inning, but I still don't think she spotted it. I think she was waiting for the play-by-play. The familiar radio sounds so different in the ballpark. Daddy wore plaid shorts over his white skinny legs and puffed a cigar. He began to like baseball when he found someone who knew less about it than he did. He explained it all to Mom, mostly according to his own logic. He had an accountant's sense of symmetry, and the diamond pleased him. The profusion of numbers and their richness impressed him, the implication of infinity, and it was a damn nice summer day. I think now of those bleachers, old Metropolitan Stadium full of stolid Scandinavians who never corrected him. That would have spoiled their fun. Mom would ask, "Where's that chap running off to now?" And Dad would explain, "He goes home because he has nowhere else to go." My brother and I spent most of the game doing scans scrapping with baby Twinkies, Twins fans who didn't take the hour rooting for the enemy. Charlie thinks he remembers a game-winning Bobby Richardson grand slam. I only recall the Yanks winning in the 10th and the incredibly intense luxury of that lighting-up inning. Daddy stuck with baseball, too. Like the voting that made him proudest as a naturalized citizen, he quietly exulted in being able to talk to his kids about what they liked to talk about, which was sports. What pleasure it gave him to be able to call those Sunday calls, this is later, after we all have all left home, and say, "So, Mattingly's still leading the league," or "I see where the Yankees aren't doing too well." But tonight there's an amazing comeback, another 10th inning heroic to call home about. I see where the Yankees are going great guns, though it's a few second basemen later, and the serene and splendid Willie Randolph who pulls it out for the team. It was snow because I was from South Dakota, which was totally flat. There was no skiing. I did like to skate, though. That doesn't spoil your theory, Ed, but Mongolia, South Dakota. See, when I say it, you hear my South Dakota accent coming out. I don't even talk like that, and then then you hear me. Mongolia, South Dakota. I'm gonna revert. The wind lifts a rider from his saddle. The wind can shove a rider from his saddle in Mongolia. Ah, but summer, when the wind-scorched prairies green to the border in Dakota. Oh, these lands of little water with thin streams that don't reach the sea but die away on the plains in Dakota. Oh, my man with cat-like eyes of fire and your voice like thunder, hands like bear paws in Mongolia, that can snap a man in two like an arrow. Oh, my man sleeping naked by a fire in Mongolia, feeling sparks as the stings of insects, the camp circled by carts in Dakota. An eternal blue sky lifts off the field. The 70-tongued larks rise at a silver dollar dawn in Dakota. Rise up from the feet of our horses, lilt around our ears, silence like a wave behind us in Mongolia. The wind knocks the horseflies from the cattle. My man makes the earth explode in Mongolia. But a man is not the sun and therefore can't be everywhere in Dakota. But my man with such slashes in his cheek that his beard can no longer grow in Mongolia. He remembers all things but not his own death in Mongolia. On bone skates he speeds over ice to catch animals in flight in Dakota. He sees the stars circle the sky, horses tethered to an unmoving light in Dakota. a bowl of milk and the blood of horses, roots of rushes, wild onions, millet, tea in Mongolia. He will retire alone to the banks of Battle Lake, 1,000 miles from anywhere in the world, in Mongolia, in Dakota. He will turn his face from war and return to simple things. He will turn again to purify Mongolia, Dakota. Some more recent work. It's John and I were talking yesterday about our youth as random travelers, so I thought I would read this. Excuse me. What home is. I've lived so many places, I don't know where I'm from. Everywhere seems like the town I could have lived and died in, and maybe I did. I was in Otis, Colorado, a town so peaceful the only bar was on the second floor of an old hotel. I'm a Maynard, or maniac, and lived 3 years in its white, bright, unmoving postcard. Like everyone, I was born somewhere, South Dakota in my case. My parents were from European cities, Berlin, Liverpool. And South Dakota was an accident, a refuge, a surprise, but never where they were from. Even though I feel Lutheran, Norwegian, Midwestern, in fact I'm an urban Jew, but not really since I'm from a small town, a British mother, a German father, and a past of chopping wood to heat my house. I lived in Michigan where the sky never cleared, so I took acid every day because I didn't know how else to see colors. I lived in Maryland right off an army base because my friends, all of whom I was in love with and still am, were in the service. I lived in Colorado, which was the wrong direction, though I didn't know yet that New York was possible. I lived in an old Dodge school bus and took my home everywhere I went, but it wasn't. I was on the Florida coast when rockets went up, looking for a home far beyond anything we knew. I was on a lake in South Carolina that smelled more like home than anywhere except the windy Midwestern prairie. I was looking for a road in New Hampshire where I once drank birch syrup. I fell asleep one night and woke up under a redwood. I consider Norwalk, Ohio, and Spartanburg, South Carolina, and Opelika, Alabama home, but everybody there has forgotten me. I got lost in the monochromatic streets of Cairo, but knew my way in a past life way to the wrongly mapped Napoleonic Museum. I believe Buenos Aires exists, although I've never been to South America. I believe that if I were forced to leave my home, I would happily scrub toilets in a different language. I believe that they don't mind as much as we, and I am ashamed. I'm afraid that I still take that school bus everywhere I go. I think about the Arctic more than anywhere else, but I've never been north of Inverness, Scotland. I've been to 49 states, but not Alaska. No one could call me house proud. I said no to the gift of a few acres of land in Maine. I said no to a beautiful old house in Vermont. I said no when I had the chance to stay home and see if I was home. Yellow mustard waving across Idaho, tiny bright paths on the plains, the shabby, irresistible road between San Antonio and the Mexican border, cool Albuquerque, the scary road winding down from Mesa Verde National Park. Traffic tickets in Eureka, California, Mulbridge, South Dakota, Vaughan, New Mexico, New York, New York, New York, Lightning Field, New Mexico, Spiral Jetty, Utah, Sun Tunnels, Nevada. Land art isn't home either. Big isn't home, small isn't home, love isn't home, hallelujah isn't home. The cat clutching a catnip banana, he might be home. Okay, I'm just going to read a couple of very, very new works, and I'll be out of here. So, yeah, these are new, so I don't know. You tell me. Poem made of lines. The evidence is on my face like the tread of new tires. Confidence in beauty is a kind of genius. The pretty girls, man, I can't say nothing to them. 1 minute I'm me, and then I'm still me. Red-winged blackbird silent on a wire. Elsewhere, the most beautiful and saddest word I know. The light's not shining on me, but through me. Where will I lay my head tonight? God, it sounds like everything I've ever written, doesn't it? I think go somewhere else. Okay, Maine. State of Maine. Maine. The world split open, not because I told the truth, but because I said it to you. I looked at you with the yellow eyes of memory, rose hips in the rain. We set off in a snowstorm and came home to soup, and now we are old. What happened 40 years ago that is still and never? How is it I can swim in a whale's vein and still not find my way to log cabin, birch and fir, but the world split open? So a lot of, today and yesterday, yesterday more, people have been reading translations and everybody was like super bilingual and this is so great. And so I'm like a new Norwegian speaker, but I did write my first poem in Norwegian, so I'm going to read that and then I'll read the English translation, which came after the, I just want to emphasize that I actually wrote it in Norwegian, which was a big step forward. Anybody is familiar with Norwegian here? Good. Den store appelsinen. Jeg var det håret litt våt fordi baseballens rådpapper, rusty stav og red shadings var kjent for å være fin, og jeg vil bli kjent som en kjempeflink spiller. So here's the translation. The big orange. I dyed my hair red because baseball's redheads, Rusty Staub and Red, you got that one. Rusty Staub and Red Shadings were known for being nice, and I want to be known for being a great infielder. Okay, so I am going to end with a poem that's actually a collaboration with the great poet Maggie Dupree. America the most beautiful. America the most beautiful. Your Brooklyn Bridge flung across some great water, O worthy son of our great wall. Your graffiti, I should probably say it. It's Maggie Dupree, but it's Magdalena Dubrisky, and I translated it, but you'll figure out that we just wrote it. But yeah, bilingual, what the hell. America the most beautiful. Your Brooklyn Bridge flung across some great water, O worthy son of our great wall. Your graffiti artists scribbling black jokes on the Mack trucks underground, O worthy sons of Maya Kafka. Your buxom women, their charms slung like rubles in a samovar, worthy daughters of the blue suede shoes. Your Odessa-esque cinema simpering toward the Golden West, a hamlet of the steppes. Your Empire State Building rising as high in brilliant stories as Anton Chekhov, the master. Your corn fed to the gals of the Midwest, yellow-haired as the house of the rising sun, where anarchists are kings, just like our own Prince Kropotkin. Your Lincoln Continental Divide, dividing your two continents, of white and not white, as the Urals divide our Europe from our Asia. Your motels in Shreveport with paper-protected toilet and free ice, a worthy of Pushkin's faded tailcoat. Your automobiles as powerful as Dubrovyov's, spitting hot fire in a night dark as Stalin's heart, hurling Dostoevsky big as a man's head. Your cowboys like Mongols honky-tonking on the back of a horse, such worthy sons of Genghis Khan. Your fruited plains where Hamasculas get a fair shake, where a good horse is never a bad color, and you don't get splinters from wrestling timber wolves. Your mysterious games, football the unwieldy, dwarf tossing, and the sadly beautiful ball of base. Oh, not unlike a caviar blini. Your chariots slipping to a sweet home in Chicago, swept from the bellies of lead, O poet worthy of a Volga drowning. Your psycho killers angrier than any in Mother Russia, mass murdering more than we could hope to, dressed in our drab fur hats. Oh, America the most beautiful, how I long to reach your golden shore. America that goes for the gold, America, I love your gold diggers with their hearts of gold. America, such a land of gold braid and gold bricking. America, I expect a gold star from you. America, your Grand Central Station is a bowl for goldfish. America, starring Goldilocks, is the first lady of speak shows on television. America, where I can buy all the turnips I can eat in your supermarkets, all the shoes I can wear in your supermarkets. America, someday I will be your premier. I will control Fogtown and listen to the slush pumps play your Negro jazz. I will operate an oofus and talk your kafooster. I will ice your president and eat your hot tamales. America, so is your old man. Thank you.
And so now it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Donnelly. And I'll do this in a certain way that may not be immediately obvious what I'm doing, but I can't think of a better way to do it. I have to reach a certain emotional level, and I hope this will succeed. Okay, the connection, deep connection between Patrick and me was a guy named Craig Harbison. And Craig was a very close friend of mine, an intimate friend, in fact, and a person from whom I learned a great deal, particularly about opera. I remember the first time I went to his place. He was living then in Montague, and he was showing me around his place, and went into a room such as I had never seen before outside a record store. He had, I think, it must have been every opera recording ever made. All four walls, it was just astonishing. The number of Carmens, the number of La Bohemes, and so forth, just amazing. The thing was that Craig knew about opera more than I think I've ever known anybody to know. Well, so a few months ago, Patrick was planning to have dinner with Craig, and Craig didn't show up. And the reason was he was dead. And I didn't learn that indeed until the following day or day after that. And the same, I think, is true for Patrick. Now, last year last spring I guess it was, Patrick did a reading at Smith where he was teaching, in which he used the example of Callas, Maria Callas, and as an instance of where his own verse lines came from. And so anyway, so Craig called, and he said, you know, Patrick's going to be giving this reading at Smith. I really think we should go. I said, oh, fine, well, that'd be good. I'd like to do that. But then he explained what it was. And I said, you have to understand, as you well know, that I know very little about opera. And he says, that's okay. I know very little about poetry. So we went. And I remember that afterwards, so we went to Osaka, which is a very lovely Japanese restaurant down the hill in Northampton. And so Craig begins quizzing me. He says, what did you think? And I said, I think it was fantastic. An ability with language to convey the kind of tension and emotional depth that you would find in the finest Callas recordings. And so with that, it gives me great pleasure to bring Patrick Donnelly to your attention.
thank you, Ed. That was a wonderful introduction. And you set up my reading perfectly. I'm really happy to be part of this event. I thank Ed and Chris and Lisa and Michael. And it's really been a feast, hasn't it, of different aesthetics. And I'm so delighted to meet all of you and to feast with you afterward. I've got a book coming out next February, and the title of it is Little Known Operas. The cover image is a red velvet cloak that Maria Callas wore, designed by Franco Zeffirelli, Paris Opera, 1964, Bellini's Norma. Inside the book is built with two intertwined sequences. One of the sequences is about, and also mostly in the voice of, my own very strange version of Jesus. Something about writing through this persona freed me up to say some stuff that probably would not have occurred to me otherwise. My Jesus is a gardener, a Sufi, an esoteric Buddhist, an atheist, a Japanophile, a sufferer of ocular migraines, and a fan of Federico Garcia Lorca. The other sequence is in fact about the great opera singer Maria Callas, 1923 to 1977, who I've been fascinated with for over 50 years. In 1966, for my 10th birthday, I asked my parents for a specific recording of Verdi's Rigoletto with Maria Callas, Giuseppe Di Stefano, Tito Gobbi, and conducted by Tullio Serafin. For mid-century opera fans, this was the dream team. And I think I must have learned about it from studying the liner notes of my mother's other opera recordings. The funny thing is they did give me the recording, even though my father was probably terrified that I might turn out to be gay, which he was right about. And he and I have long since reconciled around that fact. So that's a good thing to know. I don't know why it is that some of us, our imaginations seize on certain people as objects of devotion. But if you've ever felt that, you know what I'm talking about. The genius of that person, whoever it is we focus on, and their virtue, V-E-R-T-U, can be life-changing or even life-saving, even at far distance in space and time. So as a young gay kid growing up in New Mexico in the 1960s, it wasn't anything about Callas's personal life that was spiritually useful to me because I didn't know anything about that. But her sad, strange voice gave me access to my own sadness. And something about her extreme otherness seemed like a plausible model for my own otherness. You're going to hear in these poems that I confuse Callas with my own dramatically troubled mother, who first took me to the opera at the age of 6. When Jesus mentions Callas, as one does, the Callas sequence branches off from the Jesus sequence, and then at a certain point it turns around and argues with it. I'm going to start with the poem in which Jesus mentions Callas. Oh, I'm one of those poets who doesn't say anything between poems because I'm all about the sequence, so see you on the other side. Jesus said, "Just when I think I've heard everything Callas recorded, I stumble on something new. This Sanson thing I almost didn't click on because it was, you know, Sanson, who stormed out of the Rite of Spring, 29 May 1913, infuriated over the misuse of the bassoon. Anyhow, 61, Paris, Callas with her musical friend, Georges Prêtre. Too bad they couldn't have married as well. They were good together. It was 3 years after her voice was supposedly gone, she gave to one listener an experience he described on YouTube. Working with my dad in the chip shop, radio on in the background, this was played. I couldn't recognize the singer, but remember saying, "Dad, she has to be one of the greatest in the world." Her voice confused me, but how often do we get a chance to listen as if for the first time? His first time, so close to her last time. You, writing this, Jesus said, tried to be a singer when you were young. You weren't good enough. But Callas opened a neural pathway through which the representations run, masks of light and shade. Maybe her voice had almost to be gone before it could prove with inevitable little slidings from one note to its neighbor or wider, Delilah to Samson, that her confidence was shot, but not her throat, still changing every note's color, all that has dark sounds, roots thrusting into the fertile loam known to all of us, ignored by all of us, a power and not a behavior, a struggle and not a concept, not even in the throat, but surging up from the soles of the feet, her feet, before which lay paradise. Maria Callas went to Hamburg. In 1959, when Maria Callas went to Hamburg, her hair was still neoclassical. In the film, she emerges at 0 minutes, 7 seconds, silk legs the clapper of an underwater bell. But the moment I need to tell about is at 42:30, prelude of the Pirata aria, when resting her left hand on the conductor's cage, head down, eyes closed, cloistered, 30 seconds, 40, 50. She doesn't know us. We are nowhere and no one. Descending figure, strings distressed, dissonant, trembling, swelling. Remember Mom in the 60s? Her door closed, sometimes till noon. Crack up at 1436. The trouble starts at woe to him, Lady Macbeth, letter scene, who sets uncertain foot and then retreats. On retreats, her mouth starts square, G, A, B, high C, then spreads. The C thins, curdles, acidic. But to me, it's less important that she cracks the high C. Yes, she does. She did. 1959, moment 1436. Than what her face did, her hands. Eyes widen, narrow, widen wider while she tries to save the note. After its splinters, all gone, went wrong so fast, her right hand apologizes out from the breast, back, saying, well, I tried. I practiced for 22 years, for instance. So for a moment, 10 measures, horn, trumpet, trombone, strings, how about we shut our eyes and smile to ourselves? Then side-eye to the conductor, not your fault, moving on. Come on, hurry, I want to burn that cold heart of yours. YouTube, broadcast yourself. Go ahead, keep clicking around. One of these days, days you'll find yourself in the little swamp of blame where people post the black pearls. Telenere, fiasco, immortal voices cracking, the singing kite plunging, tangling, bursting into flame, drunk slurrings and stumblings, forgot where they were or what they were supposed to do. Room after room of the peoples abusing the peoples. The peoples studied singing themselves. They know better. They had piano lessons and had perfect pitch. The sacred art in fatal declining. Give us back Poncel, Melchior, Flagstadt. No wonder the poor cow had to steady herself on the rail, apparently a sore throat, downed a glass of castor oil, LOL. Reason it couldn't find the right pitch with a GPS. Is this hyena a hyena? Poor Renee, she tries twice to hit the high E and fails, twice. Poor Katya, poor Natalie, poor Jose, Franco, poor monster fat cowbelly. Poor Roberto, booed, shaking his fist, leaving the stage, playing unprofessional in my book. Don't be a sensitive bitch. Understudy, thrust forward, a nobody tenor in street clothes that looks like Bigfoot. Poor Luciano, live spirito gentile in 74. Fine, really, better than fine. A whole culture, a century of legato, except, yes, that one strangled C and a captured chuckle from some guy near the mic. You, reader, listener, maker, if you think intention is everything, go ahead, try to make something good. Try to forget that happy laugh. Long, mutinous at 4612. Then, after hiding, Callas opened her eyes and raised in profile her pointy chin, one of her mad scenes. But where's her voice? I'm just a baby in a mud house in a mountain town, so I can't help much. Maybe Mom will take me to the opera. Pull on her black Dior with the plunging back, ask me to sponge Max Factor over her scars. Those little white moons. At 44:06, her face had one hope. At 44:16, it flowed out through her eyes. But where's her voice? Her perfume was my sin. Her 50s console full of opera from Aspinwall, sometime afternoon guy who asked, did I want a knuckle sandwich? I now know that when I'm 9, I'll sing soprano. Act 1 altar boy in Tosca, Trouble in Butterfly, Marie's kid at the end of Wozzeck on his stick horse. Hop, 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 and I'll shake Stravinsky's hand. I can't help this either, but Dad might have worried less about queers in the theater and more about the afternoons he was away. At 4612, I'm still 3, so I won't hear it for another 55 years, when finally, is it day or night, am I alive or buried, she opens her mouth. Callas versus Jesus. Jesus includes Callas, but Callas has no Jesus in her. It being very Greek of her to ignore him in favor of his mother, and to count upon her understanding of why a woman would feel the need to say over the radio, I would not kill my enemies, but I will make them get down on their knees. I will, I can, I must. Goodbye, little table, at 2 minutes and 15 seconds. While we two were together, we only ever needed one glass to drink from, she sang. Rumors that Callas had a baby named Omero Lengrini. The earth, the dirt. It doesn't refuse any step we might make today. not more than yesterday. The space between atoms isn't more remote, lonely, angry. Because some of these mornings when my foot first touches the ground, I have to cry, Mother, Mother. Callas as Medea. Never type in the comments section that she had the voice of an angel. Please, fool. What angel ever cried wronged, wronged, wronged from all 6 tits while warming her feet at a fire made with the other soprano's pretty hair? One feather of the firebird, it said, could light a darkened room. If you must type something, type a voice of white phosphorus, of ichor, of the Centralia mine fire still burning after 54 years, of a cloak made with flayed angel skins with their caroling tongues still attached. Because what you see when with her nightshade Callas x-rays the dark room where you thought you were alone is the feathered gods at work, bringing death to the living and raising the dead to life. Tombeau at the grave of Maria Callas, an empty niche in the Columbarium Père Lachaise, Paris. She whom you seek is not here. Don't put your ear to the earth. She is not in the earth. Begotten by Apollo upon Litsa Dimitriadou, famous for a downward chromatic plunge and terrible mistakes in love, finally her myth was scattered over the Aegean. So if anything, put your ear to the sea, its menses hoisted up by the moon, then let fall when that fucking rock turned its jealous, songless face away. Callas and the First Noble Truth. You critics threw her ashes into the sea, complaining she had 3 discreet voices. But how good did you think you deserved things to be? All life is unsatisfactory, Buddhism teaches. You critics threw her ashes into the sea, just as other critics shot good Jack Kennedy and left him in pieces. But how good did you think you deserved things to be? Saying, let God deliver her if he delight in her noises, you critics threw her ashes into the sea. Sinatra too, Garland, Elvis, Coltrane, Stravinsky, now nothing but traces. But how good did you think you deserved things to be? Dead in Paris at 53, no Greek to retrieve her from Hades, you critics threw her stolen ashes into the sea. But just how good did you think you deserved things to be? Envoy, Callas and my mother say goodbye. 1. After whoever filched her urn from its niche in the columbarium, then, sleepy, bored, set it down, I'm making up this part now, on Christmas Day on the path of the dragon, it was Basso who decided on the Aegean. The sea being the one place where when you put something, you always know where it is. A windy day, her ashes blew back in their faces, their mouths. 2. Following me, watching, listening, writing this, you can't save me. Out the window, I'll sleepwalk again over the rickety mill race. I'll wake up, it's in my music, again on the divan of some man, not your father. And again, I'll cross the Alps on just my exhaled breath. Bruna's hand. You went to her niche in '87, stole a white rose Bruna, her maid, had left. Bruna's hand left a rose, and your hand carried it away. Last poem. The primal uses of Pallas. After about 1 million births, the soul recognizes the scent of placenta carried from a darkened room in a bowl, destined for a variety of ancient uses. Thank you.
Acknowledge the work that Ed Foster does on these things. Ed is poet, publisher, organizer of readings, editor of one of the most significant magazines in my poetry time, where I was talking to somebody last night where I literally, it would arrive in the mail and your stomach would jump and you went upstairs to pull it out and see how, I think the example I used, the next installment of Nate Mackey's essay was going to play out in that magazine. All of which is to say he has for, my God, we've known each other for a long time, you're right, many, many decades, created this immense place for us all to work within. So thank you, Ed. Thanks for doing this. Thank you for my involvement. So that brings me and us to our last reader, who is Fanny Howe. For me, poetry is not achievement, it is becoming. And that allows me, that allows me to say that the Fanny Howe that I met 30 years ago, pushed to her very gently by the magnificent Mr. William Corbett, who said, you need to hear this, and sent me to a reading one night. And then very gently said, she'd come read for you, and which brought her into my clutches. That Fanny Howe is indeed still the Fanny Howe that is sitting here with us tonight after 30 years. But over that time, I've also watched her become 1,000 different apparitions of whatever it is that is within her incredibly well-lived and beautiful life. It's a life that's been gentle. It's a life that has had force and intent. And the last few books that she has put out, to come back to that, have been her stretching and encompassing more becoming, not achievement, more becoming. And in that, it has been absolutely breathtaking. Needle's Eye was in form and content, just head spinning. And The Wages, which Mr. Corbett just put out with his pressed wafer, one of the last books the pressed wafer put out, quite literally, as I sat on the plane going to Portugal, had me in tears, just reading the first chapter. And who can ask anything more than that from any poet? So please welcome Fanny Howe.
Thank you, Michael. And this audience that sat through so many hours of hearing poetry, great magnitude.
Closer.
Such intense and high poetry. So I was sort of uncertain when I set out today what I would do, and I'm still uncertain. But I think what I'll do is begin with poems, and I won't be a long reader. I tend to read very short amount of time. So this is from my selected poems, which came out about 10 years ago. And it sort of sets the tone, I think. This first poem is really, it's called Goodbye Post Office Square. And in it, the figure of William Corbett moves as a kind of specter. Where wrought iron spears punctuate the cone, and rain turns to snow a minute, I learned 6 poems equal the dirt in the road, 20 more make a cobweb. 35 muddy bodies equal a wall. 1.5 jobs don't make a living. Great novels are stained glass. Their pain is their color. Never welcome on the hill, I looked like a fool with my daily thanks. But the wine was my joke. It was really water. 2 stones equal 2 kisses up there. A leather jacket equals a terrier. In the next world, I discovered a hovel where a naked eye writes with a nail. There you're as small as 0, the hole in the wall the mouse goes in with a whorl of cheese for the littlest glass cutter to eat. To paint 1 rose equals a life in that place. And on the thorny path outside, 1 cathedral is equal to the sky. And this one is called Lines Out to Silence. How long I've waited, I can't count. Long days in green, eternal advent, like fine bones drying in the north wood snow when the whites of the hunter have come and gone. I'm animal, mineral, vegetable friend calling to one. It keeps me young. Through rain clouds on the hills I call, down to the ivy watery walls, past the gate, slate roof and brick, painted to childhood size. To one I cry, come, take the walk with me home. No more cinders, the cellar water is iced over. Red squares have dropped off the log with days of the Epiphany. Uniforms are thrown down and Jack Frost paints up a storm. At dawn, alone, I see the moon get lost in the west, dragging her skirt of water behind. Is it too soon or too late to put bread on the table, then chocolate, to know joy in the bed, the hidden breath of spirit or hope, like a ribbon of childhood's hair in soap? Blue river, icy sunk, where something but nobody fell. Now theology is necessary for the way there are these holes and questions. Père Noël, whose presence like questions come from the mind, let me be helpless and hopeless this coming year. Let me know God and not feel fear. Winter tones are rose and glass, the sun as false as all nostalgias. If this world isn't good enough for us, then an afterlife won't be enough. Dry is the word for a life of solitude, but a flood would be like a two-faced friend, one thing in a virgin forest, another in a garden bed. As the moon is an alien rock, one who has attended history intact is only an ornament. Snow be in this time with us as music, river frozen and twigs done. Lists of birds are etched into the birches, white notes on a yellow scroll. A cross of light on the ceiling or wall tells the room's a cell. Contemplation of white lines crossing, coos behind the wainscoting. If this is the end, it brings no surprise. Like the ghost of a woman from ruin to doors with one pair of shoes in a drenching rain, or when a spirit in bird form hits the glass, I wave farewell by the lash of my eyes to say goodbye to romance once, and much time passed. No, my Führer will never recover from that hour, 10 years ago, 6 months from now. I may never see the Vatican or Troy, but only let me sit in a car somewhere I recognize as home, by the hand of the one I love in mine, just once, O universe, one more time. I think I'll just hop way forward into the present time, where I've been writing, putting together a manuscript that Grey Wolf will be doing when I've got it settled. This poem is called The Word. Stop in your tracks, take off your shoes, close your eyes. The Word knows what to do. For the blind, touching is seeing. Home, in. The word is like a flood in shape and speed. You will like the way it rushes east and west at the same time. Echoes and solidifies and breaks apart. It streams like a northern light. But it's the word. The word makes no sound. The word never made no sound, and will not ever, out of parched minds and tongues, break this law. The word is not particles or waves or tangles. It runs all around. The word wrote itself and continues to write. Stuffs the papyrus away in space, invisible ink, and yet it runs. It runs ahead of the mouth of the West. It meets itself running the other way. If you want to appear, turn to another. The word lives alone everywhere, lives as a pariah that only listeners will know by ear. The word doth say and attend only to this sad refrain. Listen, we did our best. Our lives were saved. It wasn't fair. We had to let the animals die. The second to last came at dawn. He shoveled up the roots and burned them. There were about 100 boots from the soldiers who died in Iraq before and after Syria. They were dirty and curled at the toes. What should we do? What can we do? Take off your shoes. You've walked far enough. Take them off and feel the ground. You've come a long way against the sun. What's about to come? Crusty desert, stone-grown towns, barefoot children, not even a crown of thorns, salt rivers, snow-white animals, dipping into foam. The same names. My new name for holy is lost. My new name for lost is sane. We don't have a name for God or Lord, but the word still holds. Will we row across a rubbery sea or bob in the sky, vomiting, singing, falling over, losing our voices, our wits, our hearing? Will we be glad to die? Will we keep our balance on a flying rug? Will somebody care? What did that little prince say to the children? If a shoe is lying on the highway, it indicates an accident. When two shoes are crossed, it means instability. When two shoes are lined up, it means a door. You will never see the face, but you can guess the age. Sneak away, the race is ending. There might be a brighter night when stars slide forward and we disappear. Always hold both east and west, and be sure to wear two shoes. There was one more page that I can't seem to extract it. Okay. Put your feet on the ground, Moses. Take off your hood. And what's that in your hand? My staff. Your coat? The sheep enjoy the smell. Take it off and throw it in the bin. Everything human is poisoned. You must burn, not bury. In a man-made world, you can't buy wood. And then this last little thing I'll read is called Clouds. And it sort of continues that. The word is the shepherd, whose call we remember. The meadow and rocks, the rutted water, a little dribble of silver in a valley swallowed by shade. Its murmurs are soft, too soft to hear at a distance. My shepherd's a figure invisible to all. The sheep, little siblings of no harm done. Bridal curls, pre-cotton in the clover. A smile without content, pink and sweet. Oh slow, oh weary. A coat is a kind of fluff that goes up in filament theory. The plurality of the apple makes us dare to pulp. Can we breed lambs without seeing meat? This is my body I cannot eat. Once the lambs were tender towards the shepherd, now they shall want to take his eyes off them. Lamb, unremembered, so many hanging and days spent fenced in, split lips for laughter to be released, or songs or bleats, memories ejected onto canvas or score, or brains where they burned their impressions in. Spray, dispersion, atoms up close for crying. They had no bleat without a mother to create and hear it. Not the lamb, its fleece, eyes, meat, tongue, heart are tied up for a factory. At first there were foals, now there are millions of mass-produced bundles of wool wrapped up on hooks for the fridge and the loom. Roast lamb, mint jelly, sprigs scenting the meat like incense, a burnt offering is the only one the word accepts. Not rare or well done, but burned, burned, burned. And it was a cold day on earth, and I was in a pram. The snow was like a lamb shorn in the upper circle. Someone pushed me over the ice and stones. Another chattered behind. A rubber nipple was pressed on my lips. Gagged and spat until my tears were milk. Everything seemed like something else. The number of wheels was too large for my body to contain in a dream. But the silver bar could be seen to be long with faces beaming in reflection from the land of the living. Thought I saw a flock impaled on a fence, then more clouds God free overhead. 0 and 1 sat on either side of me. Was trapped in apparatus and a family, like so many before and after. A central contradiction once discovered leads to collapse or evolution. The tremors on a path to nothing created weather. We all mentioned it for years when we met, a long road on a quest for equality with heaven. Thank you.